Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Gitanjali Mahapatra. These days, just looking at a gas price sign can be stressful, and for some, buying gas may be the expense that breaks their budget. The Auto Club of Southern California says the average price of gas in LA has risen 45% since this time last year. The average gallon of regular now costs around $5.80. In some locations, premium gasoline can reach $7 a gallon, leaving commuters wondering, why is gas still so expensive? Some of it has to do with the war in Ukraine, which caused a spike in energy prices worldwide, but some of it has to do with history. Since 1995, state lawmakers, in conjunction with the Environmental Protection Agency, have required California's oil refineries to produce cleaner burning fuel to improve air quality, and that cleaner blend is more expensive. According to AAA, California's gas currently costs $1.60 more per gallon than the national average. The spike in prices has prompted calls for relief. Governor Gavin Newsom has proposed sending direct payments of $400 to Californians with a registered vehicle. Residents without cars won't receive checks, but Newsom's plan also calls for $750 million in aid to local public transit agencies. Republican lawmakers prefer a plan to suspend California's gas tax. Drivers currently pay an extra 51 cents per gallon, which the state uses to fund the transportation department and highway repairs. High gas prices could have real political implications. Republicans hope voters will be inclined to blame a Democratic White House for higher gas prices in the upcoming midterm elections. On Point's Debbie Martinez has more.
Thank you, Gitanjali, and joining me today are two guests, Mark Lacour, an editor-in-chief for Oil and Gas Global Network, and Jimmy Troderman, an economist at the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, for our generation, high gas prices are just a norm, but a little bit of research from Energy Information Administration reveals that in the 90s, gas was less than $2. When did gas prices start to rise? I'll start off with you, Jimmy.
Yes, so I think the first thing to take note of is that $1 today is not the same as $1 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago because of inflation. We probably all have a parent or grandparent that remembers paying $1 to go to a movie theater. Today, a dollar does not go that far. So it's important to acknowledge when comparing gasoline prices that $1 in the past is not the same as today. Gasoline prices are high now, but it's not unprecedented times. So we saw high gasoline prices from 2011 to 2014. We saw high gasoline prices during the financial collapse in 2008. And there were high gasoline prices around the Iran-Iraq war in the late 70s and early 80s. So just looking at the price alone, you might not be able to tell that, but when you adjust for inflation, you can tell that gasoline prices have placed a significant burden on families at several points in history.
Do you have anything to add, Mark?
Yeah, it's the gasoline prices are historic highs, and it's market driven. A lot of people want to point at one or two individual happenings, such as Ukraine-Russia conflict, and say that's the reason. And it's not true. There's a whole bunch of things that go into what you pay at the pump. And we're in a high fuel pump price market for probably the rest of this year, and maybe a little bit longer. So it's gonna get better. It's just give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, so a reporter, Tracy Mejia, and we went out to some local gas stations and we asked some customers if they knew that California had the highest gas prices in the nation. Some said yes, some said no, and then we asked if they knew why and their overall thoughts on gas. And here's the video. Do you know that California has the highest gas prices in the nation?
Yes.
Can you take a guess why, or do you know why?
Government policies and more fuel, I'll say cleaner fuel.
Like so overpopulated or something like that? Like there's so many people here? I don't know why.
The war is going on through the Russia and Ukraine. That's why gas price is going high. All the world, all the states too.
Because of the war that's going on right now?
Hopefully they go down soon.
So hopefully it goes back down to like 3 months.
So, although prices are dropping in California, according to the American Automobile Association, California still has the highest gas prices in the nation. Is there one single answer or multiple answers to this question?
Oh, it's multiple answers. It's a whole bunch of things spread out over a period of time.
Yeah, Mark, we can go with you.
Yeah, so a bunch of things. So first thing is gasoline, like any other retail delivery, has a raw feedstock, which is crude oil, right? So you have to cover the cost of getting the crude oil out of the ground. That's a big part of what you pay for at the pump. And then you have to turn that crude oil to gasoline. That process is called refining. That's another part of what you pay for at the pump. Then you got to move it. So gasoline is heavy. It's 6 pounds a gallon. So no matter where you are, no matter what gas station you buy gasoline in, it comes from the closest refinery. So if you're near the El Segundo refinery Chevron has in California, whether you buy your gasoline from Exxon, Shell, Valero, Pemex, whatever, it's all coming from the Chevron refinery. Because of logistics, it comes from the closest refinery. And that refining part, that distribution marketing, is another percentage of what you pay for at the pump. Then you get to what we're going to end up talking about now, which is taxes, both state and federal taxes. That adds another, anywhere from 8 to 16, 17% at the pump. So when you look at all those different costs of manufacturing gasoline, when one of those costs goes up, regardless if the rest of them stay the same, the price at the pump goes up. So there's a bunch to unpack here.
Yeah. Jimmy, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Mark hit on a lot of the key points. Like you mentioned, there's taxes. There's both federal taxes and state taxes. And so in California, they have the second highest gasoline tax, but then once you add in fees, they do have the highest tax. They also have, and somebody pointed to this in the video, they have strict regulations on gasoline specifications to reduce emissions. And to produce that gasoline, it's a little more expensive. And then there's geographical factors. California is not close to most of the refining hubs in the U.S., and they don't have the ability to import gasoline through pipelines because they don't really have many interstate pipelines. So there's a lot of geographical factors too. And recently in March, a couple of the refineries in California went down temporarily, and so that contributed to higher prices then.
Yeah, the other little bit is we have two blends of fuel in this country. We have a winter blend and a summer blend. And so every time we switch to the other blend, and this is to keep air quality high to reduce pollution, there's a bump in prices. And actually, you're getting ready to see it happen very soon when the summer blend gets released. So it's just, once again, to everybody's point, it's Jimmy's right. There's a lot of moving parts here, and you can't really point your finger at one particular piece of it.
So the winter blend, does that mean gases are going to be lower, or how does that work, the winter and summer?
It's a supply and demand thing. So just like anything else, just like if your favorite yogurt was chocolate and you go and you want to switch it to vanilla, there's a cost for them switching. Even though the cost of the yogurt's exactly the same, there's a cost of the switch. And that's what we pay for at the pump. The refineries, the part of the industry that turns crude oil into gasoline to fuels, operates at a very low margin. So any increase to their cost is automatically passed on to the consumer.
Does Newsom and the GOP proposals for the relief from high gas prices make sense? What's the point of the $400 check to each car owner? We can go with you, Mark.
It's a political sham. I mean, everybody would like to have $400 in their pocket, including myself, right? But as far as making a difference, it's the market that has to rebalance itself. The federal government, the world geopolitical arena, consumption, all of that figures into the cost. And the biggest thing right now is the supply of raw feedstock, So the price of crude, unfortunately, is high. And this started happening before the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It's actually in November, I predicted we're getting ready to go through a world energy shortage of epic proportions, which is what we're in the middle of right now. So there's not an easy, quick fix to bringing the pump prices back down.
Also, California has the highest gas taxes in the nation. Instead of sending people out checks, isn't it better just to lower the gas tax?
100%. But that tax feeds the political spending machine in California, and not just California, every state in the U.S., right? Retail gasoline taxes is a consistent, forecastable source of revenue for state governments. And so, yes, if California and if my state of Texas and if Florida, if the state governments would drop the state taxes for temporary to lower prices, it would be an instant impact at the pump. But then who's going to pay to run the business of the state governments? It's not an easy choice to make. It's not as easy as it sounds.
And Mark, what can California do to lower gas prices?
California can say, you know what? We're sitting on a ton of high quality hydrocarbons underneath our feet. We have literally tons of conventional reservoirs, which are cheap produced in California. You need to start producing your own oil. Then you need to let your refineries refine your own oil. And then you need to let your refineries ship the gasoline in the most cost effective manner to the retail gas stations. If you did that, the gasoline in California would probably be cheapest in the nation. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. And so you're basically, even though you have your own oil to turn into gasoline underneath your feet, you're importing it from other countries. And remember, I talked about the extraction and the moving is cost. Well, now you're paying other countries to extract that oil, and then you're paying other companies to move that oil to California. So it's and I'm not picking on California. There's quite a few states in the U.S. that do that sort of thing. On the East Coast, they're doing it with natural gas. They import natural gas, even though 100 miles away in Pennsylvania, there's tons of it. So it's politics.
So, Mark, do you think why can't California use their own crude oil instead of using foreign crude oils? Does it have to do with the California's geographic or something like that?
It's pure politics. So your voters have decided in California that they want to limit the extraction of oil for environmental reasons. And so on the surface, that sounds awesome. But I'll ask you a question. Have either one of y'all ever heard of a Russian or Chinese oil spill? The answer is no. That means one of two things. That either means the Russians and the Chinese are better at it than we and the Europeans, or it means they don't tell when they have an environmental impact. The answer is they don't tell. So if you're in California and you're really seriously concerned about the world's environment, it's actually better for the environment to use your own oil instead of Russian or Chinese oil, and you're not moving it. Most spills happen when you think about pipelines and super tankers when you're moving the oil. If you would use your own oil, it would be even better for the environment. So it's a matter of the industry and the politicians educating the public in a way that gets rid of political jargon, opinions. Let's just talk about the facts and the truth. It would be a very easy thing to drop fuel prices in California if the politics would change.
Jimmy, do you know where the gas tax goes to?
Yes. So most of the gas tax goes to road maintenance and transit projects. That's the majority. Another portion goes to the DMV and state agencies that regulate traffic laws. And then there's small percentages that go into other various areas, transportation related debt, administrative costs, some environmental costs, etc.
Republican representatives in California have been pushing for the suspension of gas tax since it could save drivers a little over 50 cents per gallon. Why is the idea so radical, unacceptable for the Democratic counterparts? Mark,
that's you could throw that one at me.
Or Jimmy.
So the issue is, I don't know what's happened in the last 10 years in our politics in this country, but it's become us or them, my way or the highway, no middle ground. This is one of those things that both sides could easily compromise on and lessen the impact to the environment, make sure the state has sufficient revenue from its fuels to run the state government, and decrease the cost at the pump, which would then help the citizens of California have a better level of lifestyle. If both sides could just get together and just talk through this, they could fix this. But for whatever reason, nowadays with our politics, it's butting heads and people don't want to compromise anymore. It would not take much. I mean, I guarantee you that me and Jimmy could sit down for 15 minutes on a piece of paper and a pencil and figure out how to fix this and do it. Right. It's just you have to get people to, even though they have different political opinions, there needs to be some consensus when you're trying to make sure you take care of your state's population.
How is California's reformulated gasoline, or RFG, as the EPA calls it, different from regular gasoline?
I'm going to let Jimmy take that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So California's regulations call for lower amounts of lead, lower amounts of sulfur, which leads to SO2 emissions, which are related to acid rain and lung diseases. And so those to produce gasoline of that variety, it's more expensive. And there's other compounds that are also regulated that usually have complicated names.
The average price for Kansas is $3.62, which is the cheapest gas in the nation. Do you think we'll ever see those price gases again here in California?
I can take this. So it's good to keep in mind where gasoline prices have been in California. If you just go back 1 year, April 18th of last year, the average price of gasoline in California was $3.84 per gallon. So that's right around where the Kansas price is now. And at that time, crude oil prices were somewhere between $65 and $70 per barrel, which over the past 5 to 10 years is a pretty average price. Now, I can't predict when crude oil prices will be back at that price again, but I'd say it's decent likelihood that at some point in time, oil prices will be at that rate, and therefore gasoline prices should be in that high $3 range.
Yeah, my 2 cents is California, if you wanted to, could easily have year over year the cheapest fuel prices in the country. It's a decision on the voters in California if they want to go down that route or not. The mechanics are pretty simple. They're pretty well to understand. So is the finances. And California literally is sitting on huge conventional reservoirs. It's literally right under your feet right now. Do I think you'll ever see those cheap prices again? No. Could you? Easily. Yeah.
Got it. As of 2022, 16 states across the country have adopted the use of RFG. If the entire country switched to RFG, would there be a consistency of gas quality to make prices like stabilize?
Ooh, that's a good one, because there's more to gasoline quality than. So when gasoline is refined, wholesale gasoline is almost identical no matter where you get it. It's when it hits the terminal and each company adds its own special additives. So ExxonMobil has its own proprietary blend. So does Chevron. So does Valero. That's when you really start differentiating the gasoline. But you also get economy of scale. So I would suspect that if the whole country switched, we'd see a bump in prices at the pump. But given enough time, the refiners would figure out how to optimize that blend, and they would bring the prices within a half a cent of what was being produced before. Actually, Jimmy, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, so I think you hit on a lot of key points. If we talk about California specifically, their RFG, not all RFG is equal. And so California has stricter regulations, stricter specifications on their gasoline. And so if the question is whether it would help California gasoline prices, it would depend on whether or not the other states adopted RFG standards similar to California's. Because if not, then they can't actually send their gasoline to California. It might be a little easier, but it wouldn't be quite the same gasoline.
So are gas companies, are they making above normal profits right now since prices are so high? I can
no.
go with you, Mark.
And not only no, ExxonMobil and Shell own no retail gas stations in the U.S., right? So most retail gas stations are owned by something called a jobber. Most convenience stores in the U.S. make 50 to 60 grand a year in profit. And so in order to make a comfortable living, you have to own 2 or 3 or 4 gas stations. And that's usually your neighbor. So and what happens is your neighbor decides he wants an ExxonMobil gas station from the marketing clout of having ExxonMobil's name there. So he pays extra for that. But the gasoline in this convenience store most probably did not come from an ExxonMobil refinery. So it's there's a lot of people in the public thinking that we're paying higher prices at the pump and the oil companies are making huge profits. Their margins stay the same. Think about just human behavior. If there's a Chevron station across the street from a Shell station and Chevron drops its price a penny, guess what that Shell station has to do to keep business? They have to drop their price. The gasoline is almost sold at cost. The money from the convenience store is usually made on the Slurpees and potato chips that you buy. And so the oil and gas companies are not making abnormal profits at the pump. And most of the oil and gas companies in the U.S., especially super majors, don't own retail gas stations.
Wow. If gas prices push more people to buy low emissions cars like electric vehicles, isn't that a good thing?
It's a good thing in some ways. It's not going to lower gasoline prices. The same, if you think about crude oil as energy, and there's a cost to that energy, that cost works its way through the entire value chain, including electric cars. So a lot of that Tesla is actually made from hydrocarbons, the plastics, the adhesives, the vinyls, the insulation on the wires. And then that Tesla has to be fueled with electricity. And even in California, I think on the best days, maybe only 40% of California's electricity at its peak actually comes from renewables, which means even at the best days, 60% is coming from hydrocarbons. So you're still burning hydrocarbons to make that electricity. If you've noticed, your price of electricity is starting to go up in California because of those costs. And so it's buying an electric vehicle is really cool. It does a lot of really neat stuff. If you've ever driven a Tesla, the first thing you notice is that it's a great car, not that it's an electric car, but buying a Tesla won't reduce the prices at the pump.
Jimmy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would differentiate the hydrocarbons that go into electricity from gasoline, because gasoline is not what produces electricity. It's tough to say how more electric vehicles would affect gasoline prices. On one hand, if more people drove electric vehicles, that would mean there's less demand for gasoline. And generally, less demand for a product brings down prices. On the other hand, if there's less demand, it's very possible and maybe even likely that some refiners in California will shut down. And so supply would potentially go down with it. And so it depends on that balance between how much gasoline is being produced and how much is demanded.
Yeah, another little bit in there, Jimmy's spot on, is the fact the refineries have a choice of what their output is. And so right now, diesel's in huge short supply globally. So refineries are looking at making gasoline for the retail markets in the US or making diesel for international markets. The diesel has a higher margin. So right now they're making both. But if you had enough electric vehicles on the road, you're right in the fact that it would drop demand, but then refineries, especially in California, might choose to quit refining gasoline, period. Then you would have a shortage again, and we'd be back up to $6 a gallon.
Yeah, and we saw the Martinez, California refinery, Marathon's Martinez refinery shut down in late 2020 to switch to renewable diesel.
The Martinez refinery, was that here in California or?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a Phillips 66 refinery that right now is going through the same thing. They're converting themselves to produce biodiesel, which means their ability to put gasoline in California's market is just gone. And other refineries are covering that load, but you can only do that for so long.
So why are gasoline prices so different from one city to another? Does it have to do with the crude oil?
Part of it's logistics. Remember, it's 6 pounds a gallon, so it's expensive to move it. Pipelines are the most environmentally effective and cheapest way to move stuff. But if you can't build a pipeline, you have to move things by truck and rail, which number one is dangerous for the environment and for the people, and it's not cost effective. And then different cities also have different parts of the process that add to costs, such as licensing for the convenience stores. You know, some cities it's dirt cheap to get a license to open a convenience stores. Some cities it's really expensive. Those costs are naturally passed on to consumers at the pump.
The crude oil determines the price of the gases, correct?
It's a big part of it. I think about 50% of the total price of the pump is actually the cost of the crude.
Right. So in our January data, we had gasoline prices being made up by crude oil by 61%, with refining costs making up 14%, taxes 14%, and distribution and marketing 11%. It changes from month to month and it varies from state to state, but it is, like Mark said, it's generally 50% or higher is the crude oil price, especially when crude oil prices are as high as they are now.
Why can't fuel prices change as quickly as crude oil?
It's a totally different financial stream. It's to drill an oil well takes a lot of time and a lot of money, whereas gasoline's on the very end of that stream of revenue. And it's, like I said, it's the least profitable part of it. So when it takes a while for crude prices to actually trickle all the way down to the refineries. And then you get into some deep financial stuff like future trading and all that sort of stuff, which we could go down. But the short version is oil is speculated upon and bought and sold at certain price points before they produce the oil. So then they have to deliver it at those price points and at those volumes. So it doesn't matter what you say today. It really matters what you said 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And then the act of producing crude, if you start from scratch and you want to spud a well on land, it's a year from doing all the work to actually go into production. Offshore, maybe 10 years. So it's not one of those things you can just flip a switch and make production come online.
Compared to the gas market as of today, where do you think it will be in the next year or next few years?
I'm giving Jimmy that one.
Okay, so in our short-term energy outlook, we have gasoline prices at the end of 2023 going down about $1 from what they are now. The assumption behind that is lower crude oil prices in the mid-80s dollar range. So in California, if prices were to go down $1, they'd be in the maybe $4.50 per gallon range. But there's a lot of uncertainties there. That's just a forecast.
Yeah, after going through 2020, the next 2 years, I've almost quit making forecasts because you can't predict any of that stuff. Although each November, I do my predictions for the next year, and surprisingly enough, I got some of it right this time.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank both of our guests, Jimmy and Mark, being here today. You're watching On Point. We'll be right back.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
After 15 years of smoking, Eva Marie quit. There's a new lung cancer screening that could save her life. You stopped smoking. Now start screening. Learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on LA 36 and Santa Clarita Valley Television. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Gitanjali Mahapatra.